So first of all, a very warm welcome to all of you. Uh, a lot of the things that I was going to speak about actually has already been spoken. So what I will do is also take some time to maybe explain the origin of the few categories that I am essentially going to speak about. It is also very interesting because both the categories, when we entered that particular essentially market, we were not very sure how is it essentially going to respond. One of my most funny anecdote that I essentially give to everyone, when we started at that time we used to call it general merchandise, but a lot of that was also grocery, or you can associate with any of the other three categories as well. When on the first day, when we essentially launched that specific category, we listed all the items, and it became very late in the night. It was like, I think, 11 p.m. or something like that. And then obviously afterwards, when people were very tired, they said, okay, fine, let's just launch it and let's go home. When they came back next day, and they looked at the numbers, and we had a very crude way to look at numbers, an HTML page that just outlined exactly what are the numbers which are there. When they essentially saw the number, they were completely taken aback. We were selling all the items from very comparatively expensive products in the grooming phase worth 2,000 rupees to individual soaps of 20 rupees. Yes, at that time we were also selling that. And at that time, our co-founder, Binny, he basically remarked, and that still is something which is essentially there in my mind. And again, it was it was in more crass language, but the way he said that, if we start selling pets as well, I am sure people will essentially come and buy it. So that has been the truth of Flipkart since then. The number of people who are on the platform is far higher than the number of people who are essentially purchasing. What they are doing is essentially waiting, is trying to figure out what to purchase, how to purchase, and is this something that I really want? And that is what they spend most of their time into. So after that, whenever we started adding any other category, it just sold like hotcakes because people were actually waiting for it. The second category that we spoke about and that I'm going to speak about is lifestyle. In lifestyle, we were behind in the sense that the company that we acquired, Myntra, was far ahead of us. They started by launching T-shirt. But what happened after that is that when they completely pivoted into a pure lifestyle e-commerce, they saw a big change in the way consumers were looking at it. And we were far behind. They were like multiple crores, and we had not even started, and we had started in a very small number. We said, okay, let's invest in it and see essentially what happens. Again, the same impact. When we went with our full catalog, with the full pricing, with the kind of selection that the end customer needed, the categories exploded. And that is how we became much closer to Myntra than what we were earlier, and that led to a partnership that we are extremely proud of right now. In general, lifestyle has been one of those categories that is the success story for Flipkart. Why? Because it is one category that we essentially dominate across multiple platforms, and it is also the category that consumers purchase in their first instance. So a good experience in lifestyle, a good pricing in lifestyle, a good assortment of goods in lifestyle will essentially mean that the customer will become an e-commerce customer, a Flipkart customer. One of the first things that we essentially try to do in lifestyle is ensure that when we try to sell products there, we are not selling only to the people who are going very deep into the catalog, but people who are generally browsing as what we call as window shopping, just looking at items for the sake of it. What we have seen is that is what has the highest impact which is there. I can talk about the numbers, and essentially a lot of things have been already mentioned in Shyam's deck and all the other stuff that you saw. The more important stuff that I wanted to speak about is related to the number of people who are essentially there, who do not purchase, but go and purchase outside of the platform. The biggest understanding that we had essentially over the last couple of years is the number of shoppers who are engaged. They look at all the items which are there. They look at the styles and trends and whatnot. And then say, you know what, it looks like these are the kind of stuff that I want. And let me explore other areas as well. Some people are not fully converted to e-commerce, so they go outside and look at items in the shop, what we call as really touch and feel, to make that purchase. But in the journey, more than half of more than half of shoppers of lifestyle generally do touch Flipkart. And to me, that is the primary contribution that Flipkart has on the overall e-commerce. And that is the contribution that e-commerce has on the overall ecosystem that includes what people go and purchase offline as well. One of the things that we also try to see that when we speak about customers looking at products, what range of products they see. This is something that was mentioned in Sandeep's deck. This is not one segment. The segment that we see is all across SEC A, B, C, D, E. You just keep on going where it is already there. The engagement is lower. The more lower you go, the engagement would be lower. But the customers who are there on WhatsApp, the customers who are there on only YouTube, majority of those customers are also on Flipkart and do look at the items that they eventually intend to essentially purchase. And what do we do with that? There is a whole lot of information that essentially comes out of that. This is one of the more focus areas that we want to ideate and implement over the next few years, actually next few months, is how to ensure that all the plethora of people who are essentially coming here, looking at items, we are able to essentially gather that information and use it in a far constructive way. We already use it by making it more personalized to them, by making sure that we know what kind of colors that they want. But can we essentially work with the brands to essentially figure out what kind of new styles which are there? Can we, in short, predict the essentially future in a way that allows us to be far more successful, far more really targeted, and far more influential in the whole ecosystem that we have? Similarly, for essentially general merchandise and home, that is also one of the other categories that a lot of people actually purchase. This is the category that we call as transaction essentially drivers. When you come into a platform and when you get habituated onto a platform, this is the category that people purchase a lot more. Again, the same story here. People are waiting to purchase. They are trying to essentially figure out. Obviously, we need a lot of effort to make sure that the frequency of the purchase is higher, and the headroom is absolutely gigantic. But if you look at any country, you look at US, you look at China, you look at Indonesia, which is much more closer to the way essentially we work. The penetration of e-commerce there essentially shows that it is an eventuality. It is not if, but when. When I started in e-commerce and in Flipkart, I think one of the things that I learned was more from what I call at that point of time and still are very progressive brands. A lot of these brands were influenced by what they are seeing in China, what they are seeing outside India, and were able to formulate their strategy and predict what is going to happen 5 years in the essentially future. One of the biggest mobile brands at that particular point of time was one of the first to take steps when obviously they had things like channel conflict, all the things which are associated with that. They were the first people to actually take the step and know that eventually the impact of e-commerce is much higher. We are not talking about only customers who are in the channel. We are talking of customers who are outside the channel, which means when we are trying to figure out how to influence them, it cannot be like below the line essentially targeting. It has to be much higher than that. It has to be the way we think about brand online, and which is the reason why they essentially succeeded. Similarly, there is a big general merchandise firm which is still very aggressive on Flipkart. The amount of effort, the amount of resources, the amount of, or the top of mind share that they essentially give to Flipkart is far higher than what they see as their numbers right now. And the primary reason for is all the numbers that you see on the right. the 20% penetration in Indonesia is tantamount to the fact that eventuality, that eventually it will be to those numbers. Can you shape the narrative towards your brands rather than the other way around? In the same way that I spoke about, essentially general merchandise is essentially a category that everyone purchases. So if you look at it, even if they don't buy on Flipkart, there are a lot of customers who look at all the assortment that we have, all the verticals that we have, to figure out what are the kind of things that they want. They look at the photos, they look at the information that is actually there in the catalog, and then they make the call on, you know what, all these are the kind of things I essentially want. Let me go outside, let me go to Flipkart, and it is an involved buy after that. So if you want to make sure that the basic customers who are all over India in T2, T3, T4, they also get influenced in the lower part of the decision-making funnel. Not at the part when they are not even bothered about if they are actually going to buy that product or not. The place is e-commerce, the place is Flipkart, and we have seen that again and again. So again, I don't want to go into a lot of details of that because essentially a lot of that has already been essentially covered. But the more important part that I want to leave this audience is with, don't think of what you are seeing Flipkart right now. If you had looked at what we were doing in 2012 or 2014, and if I had actually told you at that point of time, 2022 will be like that, you would have called me an absolute lunatic. My belief is that the next 5 years, next only 10 years is going to be determined by what we do as a platform, what our partners do on that particular platform. And I would require all of your support to make sure that e-commerce, that in India, and India is not just one of the rising stars for e-commerce, but the star in e-commerce with more than 50% market share. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day. Thank you. Bye-bye.